Sometimes the people who smile the widest are also collecting information. And if you stay with me till the end, especially the last few lessons, your entire perspective on trust and strength will change. Dear friends, many of us are told from childhood, be open, be vulnerable, share everything. It sounds beautiful, it sounds spiritual, but somewhere along the journey of life, many of us get hurt, not by enemies, but by people we trusted. You shared your fear, and it became gossip. You shared your struggle, and it became judgment. You shared your weakness, and one day it was used against you. And then you wonder, was I wrong to be honest? No. Honesty is sacred, but wisdom is knowing where and with whom to place your honesty. Let me walk you through 7 life lessons, like 7 steps of inner maturity. And if you truly absorb the last few, you'll never look at relationships the same way again. Sometimes in life we feel that if someone is listening to us, they must care about us. It feels natural, doesn't it? When someone nods, maintains eye contact, and lets us speak without interruption, we assume there is empathy in their silence. But life slowly teaches us a more nuanced truth. Listening and caring are not the same thing. There are people who listen because they are compassionate, and there are people who listen because they are curious. There are people who listen because they want to support you, and there are people who listen because they want information. The danger is that in the beginning, both look exactly the same. Imagine this simple scene. You walk into a crowded place holding something precious. Not gold, not money, but something far more valuable, your inner struggles, your fears, your doubts, the parts of you that are still healing. Now imagine placing those things openly on the table, assuming everyone present will treat them with care. That assumption itself is where pain begins. Not everyone who listens is emotionally invested in your growth. Some people listen because your weakness makes them feel stronger. Some listen because your confusion makes their life feel more sorted. Some listen because tomorrow, when they are bored, your story becomes their conversation starter. And some listen simply because humans are naturally attracted to drama. This doesn't mean people are evil. It just means people are human. Everyone carries their own conditioning, insecurities, and unresolved wounds. When you speak, they are not only hearing your words, they are filtering them through their own inner world. And that filter decides whether your vulnerability is treated as sacred or as currency. Many of us learn this lesson only after being hurt. We open our heart thinking we are building connection, but instead we create exposure. We confuse openness with safety. We think honesty automatically creates intimacy. But intimacy is not built by sharing everything. It is built by sharing wisely. There is also a subtle emotional trap here. When we are struggling, we want relief. We want to unload. We want someone to hold our pain so we don't have to. In that vulnerable moment, discernment becomes weak. We speak not because the listener is trustworthy, but because the pain inside us is heavy. And later, when that same information is misunderstood, judged, or misused, we feel betrayed. But here is a difficult truth spoken with compassion. Not every disappointment is betrayal. Sometimes it is simply misplaced trust. Wisdom is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. Wisdom is about understanding that not everyone deserves access to your inner life. Just like you don't give your house keys to every friendly face, you don't give your emotional keys to every listening ear. There is a quiet strength in pausing before you speak and asking yourself a simple question. Why am I sharing this? And what is the intention of the person listening? If the intention is unclear, silence is not weakness. Silence is self-protection. As we mature, we slowly stop narrating our wounds to people who cannot help heal them. We stop explaining ourselves to those who are not committed to understanding us. And this is not because we become cold, it is because we become conscious. Your story is powerful. Your struggles are meaningful. Your weaknesses are part of your becoming, but they are not meant for public consumption. They are meant for safe spaces, wise counsel, and hearts that genuinely want to see you rise. When you learn this, something beautiful happens. You stop feeling exposed. You stop feeling misunderstood. You stop feeling drained after conversations, and instead, you begin to feel grounded, centered, and emotionally sovereign. And once you understand this deeply, the next realization comes naturally. People don't just listen differently, they interpret everything through the lens of their own inner insecurity. One of the most liberating realizations in life is understanding that people do not hear what you say, they hear what they are ready to understand. Every word you speak travels through the invisible filter of the listener's inner world. Their experiences, their fears, their insecurities, their unmet desires. All of it shapes how your truth is received. When you share a weakness, you imagine the other person is seeing you as you are, but in reality, they are seeing themselves reflected in your story. If someone is insecure, your struggle becomes proof that they are doing better. If someone is jealous, your vulnerability becomes silent satisfaction. If someone is compassionate, your pain becomes a call to support. The same story, the same words, completely different reactions. This is why vulnerability can feel healing with one person and humiliating with another. It was never about your honesty, it was about their inner state. Many people are not intentionally cruel. They simply lack the emotional capacity to hold someone else's pain without comparing it to their own. When you say, "I'm struggling," their mind unconsciously asks, "Am I struggling more or less?" When you say, "I'm afraid," their ego quietly calculates, "At least I'm not as weak." These reactions are subtle, often unspoken, but deeply influential. This is also why advice often hurts more than it helps. You open your heart, and instead of empathy, you receive solutions that were never asked for. Not because the person doesn't care, but because they are uncomfortable sitting with discomfort. Your pain triggers their unresolved issues, and their response becomes a defense mechanism. There are also people who reinterpret your vulnerability as your identity. You share a moment of weakness, and suddenly that is how they see you permanently. One confession becomes a label. One low phase becomes your entire personality. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to feel smaller around them. This is where awareness becomes crucial. You must understand that your weakness is a phase, not a definition, but others may not have the emotional maturity to see that distinction. So when they interact with you, they respond not to who you are becoming, but to the snapshot of you they stored in their mind. This is painful, but it is also freeing. Because once you realize this, you stop expecting everyone to respond with depth. You stop seeking validation from people who are still learning to validate themselves. You stop explaining your growth to those who are comfortable with stagnation. You begin to see that misinterpretation is not rejection, it is limitation, and you stop taking it personally. This understanding also teaches humility, because just as others interpret your story through their insecurities, you too have done the same at some point. You have misunderstood someone's silence. You have judged someone's struggle. You have offered advice when presence was needed. This realization softens you. It makes you less bitter and more balanced. Instead of closing your heart, you open your awareness. You become selective, not secretive. You share, but with consciousness. You speak, but with responsibility. You stop throwing pearls in places where stones are appreciated more. and something profound happens inside you. Your need to be understood by everyone dissolves. You are no longer disturbed when someone misreads you. You are no longer shaken when your honesty is not received with warmth. You understand that their response says more about their inner landscape than about your worth. This is a powerful shift, because when you stop seeking understanding from the wrong places, you stop bleeding emotionally. You stop reopening wounds that were meant to heal. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's limited perception. And this naturally leads to the next realization. Vulnerability, when offered without wisdom, does not heal. It harms. There is a beautiful idea that has become very popular in recent times. Be vulnerable. And yes, vulnerability is powerful. It creates connection, authenticity, and emotional depth. But there is a side of vulnerability that is rarely spoken about. Vulnerability without wisdom can quietly become self-harm. Think about a wound on your body. When it is fresh and open, you don't expose it to dust, dirt, or careless hands. You cover it. You protect it. You allow it to heal. Only after it has healed do you show it freely, maybe even proudly, as a scar that tells a story of resilience. Emotional wounds are no different, but we often treat them with far less care. When you speak about your pain while you are still drowning in it, you are not sharing. You are bleeding. And when you bleed in front of the wrong people, they don't always help you heal. Sometimes they simply watch, sometimes they judge, sometimes they remember. Wisdom teaches us timing. There is a right time to open up and a right time to remain silent. Just because something is true does not mean it needs to be spoken immediately. Truth without timing can be destructive, both for the speaker and the listener. Many people confuse expression with processing. They think that talking about pain automatically leads to healing. But healing doesn't come from repeating the story. It comes from understanding the lesson within the story. And understanding requires reflection, not just expression. There is also an emotional addiction involved. When we overshare, we often seek relief, validation, or sympathy. It feels good temporarily, but over time it weakens our inner strength. We begin to depend on external reassurance instead of cultivating internal resilience. We start measuring our worth by how others respond to our pain. This is dangerous, because the moment validation is withdrawn, we collapse. The moment empathy is replaced with indifference, we feel abandoned. And the truth is, no one is obligated to carry our emotional weight. Responsibility for healing ultimately rests with us. Vulnerability is meant to deepen connection, not replace self-work. It is meant to be shared with those who can hold space, not with those who are merely curious. When vulnerability is placed in the wrong environment, it becomes exposure. And exposure does not heal, it hardens. You may notice this in your own life. After certain conversations, you feel lighter, calmer, understood. After others, you feel drained, embarrassed, or regretful. The difference is not what you shared, it is where you shared it. Wisdom is learning to pause before speaking and asking yourself, is this person capable of holding this truth with care? If the answer is unclear, silence is safer than explanation. And silence, when chosen consciously, is not repression. It is emotional intelligence. It is the ability to sit with discomfort without immediately seeking an outlet. It is trusting that you are strong enough to process your emotions without broadcasting them. This does not mean you must suffer alone. It means you must suffer responsibly. Seek guidance, not sympathy. Seek growth, not attention. Seek depth, not reaction. When vulnerability is guided by wisdom, it becomes transformative. When it is guided by impulse, it becomes self-sabotage. And once you understand this, you begin to see silence differently. You stop fearing it, you start respecting it. You realize that some of the strongest people you know are not the loudest, they are the most grounded, which brings us naturally to the next realization. Silence is not weakness. Silence is maturity. As we grow older, something subtle but profound happens inside us. We speak less, not because we have nothing to say, but because we finally understand the value of our words. In youth, silence feels uncomfortable. We rush to fill it. We explain, justify, defend, and narrate our emotions, hoping that if people understand us, life will become easier. But maturity teaches a different lesson. Not every truth needs a voice. Silence is often misunderstood as fear or suppression. But in reality, silence is selection. It is the ability to choose what deserves expression and what deserves protection. It is knowing that your inner world is not an open exhibition, it is a sacred space. When you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, you conserve enormous emotional energy. Explanation often comes from insecurity, the need to be seen a certain way, to be validated, to be approved. But when your sense of self becomes stable, you no longer feel the urge to clarify every misunderstanding or correct every assumption. There is a quiet confidence in letting people think what they want while you continue walking your path. Not because you don't care, but because you care about your peace more. Silence also gives your emotions room to settle. When you immediately speak in moments of pain, anger, or confusion, you often say things that don't reflect your highest understanding. But when you pause, observe, and allow time to pass, clarity emerges naturally. Silence becomes a mirror. It shows you what truly matters and what was just noise. Many conflicts in life are fueled not by reality, but by over-explanation. We say too much, reveal too early, and justify too often. And in doing so, we hand over our emotional power. Silence restores that power. There is also a spiritual dimension to silence. In stillness, you hear your own intuition. In quiet moments, you connect with something deeper than opinions. Wisdom. The mind settles, the heart softens, and answers arise without effort. This is why the most centered individuals often appear reserved. They are not hiding. They are grounded. They don't react to every comment. They don't respond to every provocation. They understand that reaction is a loss of control, while silence is mastery. Silence also protects you from regret. Words once spoken cannot be retrieved. Emotions expressed impulsively can wound deeply, both yourself and others. Silence allows discernment to lead instead of impulse. Then there is the aspect of dignity. There is dignity in not exposing your pain to those who cannot honor it. There is dignity in not explaining your wounds to those who will trivialize them. There is dignity in carrying yourself with calm, even when life feels chaotic inside. This doesn't mean you suppress emotions indefinitely. Suppression leads to heaviness, but expression must be intentional. Just as a river flows within its banks to remain powerful, emotions must flow within boundaries to remain healthy. Maturity is not about becoming distant or detached, it is about becoming centered. You don't stop feeling, you stop leaking. When silence becomes your strength, you stop being easily disturbed. People's opinions lose their grip, situations lose their intensity. You respond instead of react, you choose instead of comply. And with this inner steadiness comes another realization. Protecting your inner world is not selfish, it is self-respect. There comes a moment in life when you realize that constantly exposing your inner struggles is not honesty, it is erosion. Every time you allow careless access to your inner world, something inside you weakens. Not dramatically, not immediately, but quietly, like water dripping on stone. Over time, it shapes you in ways you never intended. Protecting your inner world is not about building walls, it is about building boundaries. And boundaries are not signs of arrogance or emotional distance, they are signs of self-respect. When you respect yourself, you become selective about where your energy flows. You understand that your thoughts, emotions, and struggles are not common property. They are personal, sacred, and worthy of care. You stop offering them to people who treat them lightly. Many people fear that if they don't overshare, they will be seen as closed off or fake. But authenticity does not require full disclosure. You can be genuine without being exposed. You can be honest without being available to everyone. In fact, oversharing often creates the opposite of respect. When you reveal everything to everyone, people subconsciously learn that your boundaries are weak. And when boundaries are weak, respect fades. Not because people are cruel, but because human psychology values what is protected. Think about it. We take better care of things that are rare, guarded, and intentional. The same is true for your emotional life. When you begin protecting your inner world, something shifts in how people interact with you. Conversations become more thoughtful. Interactions become more measured. And slowly, without force, respect grows. This also transforms how you see yourself. You stop feeling scattered. You stop feeling exposed. You stop replaying conversations in your mind, wishing you had said less. There is a calm dignity that comes from knowing you honored your own emotional boundaries. Self-respect also means recognizing when someone does not have the emotional capacity to hold your truth. Not everyone is unkind. Some are simply unprepared. Expecting depth from shallow spaces only leads to disappointment. Respecting yourself means not putting yourself in that position repeatedly. There is a deep sense of peace in choosing privacy over performance. When you stop narrating your struggles publicly, you begin processing them privately. Reflection replaces reaction. Growth replaces drama. You also become less dependent on external validation. When fewer people know your pain, fewer opinions surround it. And in that quiet space, your own inner voice becomes clearer. You begin trusting yourself more. You begin relying on your own resilience. This is not isolation. This is alignment. Protecting your inner world teaches you responsibility. Responsibility for your emotions, your healing, your growth. Instead of handing that responsibility to others, you reclaim it. You stop waiting for people to understand you and start understanding yourself. And something beautiful happens. When you finally choose to share, it is intentional. It is meaningful. It is powerful. Because it comes from a place of strength, not desperation. Self-respect also involves knowing that you don't owe everyone access to your story, your past, your struggles, your fears. They are not explanations for others. They are chapters of your journey. You decide who gets to read them. When you protect your inner world, you also protect your future. Because words spoken in weakness can shape how people treat you later. But silence chosen in strength shapes how you see yourself. And as this understanding deepens, another truth emerges naturally. It's not enough to protect yourself. You must also choose wisely whom you trust with your pain. Not everyone who shows concern is capable of care. This is one of the hardest lessons to accept, because when we are in pain, even a small gesture of attention feels comforting. But attention and support are not the same. Pity and prayer do not come from the same place. There are people who listen to your pain and feel sorry for you. Their sympathy is loud, emotional, and temporary. They shake their heads, offer dramatic reactions, and repeat phrases that sound caring but require no responsibility. Pity may feel warm in the moment, but it quietly places you below the listener. It turns your struggle into something to be observed rather than honored. Then there are people who listen differently. They don't rush to comment. They don't exaggerate your pain. They don't make it about themselves. Their presence feels steady, calm, and grounding. They don't feed you our wounds, they protect them. These are the people who pray for you, whether literally or silently. They wish for your healing, not your dependence. Sharing your weakness with the wrong person can lock you into an identity of helplessness. When someone constantly responds with pity, you begin to see yourself as fragile, broken, or incapable. Your story stops being a chapter and starts becoming a label. But when you share with someone who wants your growth, the conversation feels different. They don't glorify your pain. They don't encourage you to remain stuck. They gently remind you of your strength, even when you can't see it yourself. This is why discernment in relationships is essential. Before you open your heart, observe how the person handles other people's struggles. Do they gossip? Do they judge? Do they exaggerate? Or do they speak with respect, restraint, and compassion? People who truly care about your healing will not broadcast your story. They will not use your weakness to gain closeness or control. They will not keep reminding you of your pain. Instead, they will help you move beyond it. Sometimes the safest person is not the one who talks the most, but the one who listens with reverence. Not the one who reacts emotionally, but the one who remains emotionally available. This lesson also invites self-honesty. Sometimes we choose pity over growth because growth requires responsibility. It is easier to be comforted than to be challenged. It is easier to be sympathized with than to be strengthened. But deep down, we know which conversations leave us empowered and which leave us dependent. Choosing who hears your pain is choosing how your pain shapes you. There is also a spiritual dimension here. When you share with someone who prays for you, whether through faith, intention, or goodwill, your pain is held in a higher space. It is not reduced to gossip or analysis. It is offered up for healing, transformation, and learning. This doesn't mean the person must be perfect or enlightened. It means they must be aligned with your growth. Their intention matters more than their words. And sometimes the safest place to take your weakness is not another human at all. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is a reflection. Sometimes it is prayer. When you surrender your pain inwardly instead of scattering it outwardly, something inside you stabilizes. This realization is empowering. You stop chasing comfort and start choosing support. You stop seeking listeners and start seeking guides. And once you internalize this, the final transformation begins. You realize that your strength does not grow in explanation or validation. It grows quietly, deeply, in silence. There comes a stage in life when you realize that the strongest transformations happen without announcement. No explanations, no justifications, no audience. Real strength grows silently, like roots beneath the soil. By the time the tree stands tall, no one remembers the struggle underground. And that is exactly how it is meant to be. In the beginning, we want people to understand us. We want them to know why we are the way we are, what we've been through, how much effort it took to survive. But with time, wisdom whispers a gentler truth. Those who truly matter don't need explanations, and those who demand explanations rarely understand them anyway. Every time you explain your pain, you relive it. Every time you justify your choices, you reopen old wounds. Explanation keeps you tied to the past, while silence allows you to step forward. Growth does not require permission. Healing does not need an audience. Silence is not avoidance. It is integration. It is the space where lessons settle into wisdom. It is where pain transforms into perspective. When you stop talking about your struggles, you begin working on them. Energy that once went into narration now goes into transformation. There is also an inner dignity that emerges when you stop defending your journey. You no longer feel the urge to prove how hard life was or how strong you've become. You simply live differently. And people notice, not because you told them, but because your presence has changed. Strength expressed loudly often seeks validation. Strength lived quietly radiates confidence. This silence does not mean isolation, it means discernment. You still share but selectively. You still connect but consciously. You don't close your heart, you guard it with wisdom. When you no longer explain yourself, you reclaim authority over your life. Other people's opinions lose their power. Misunderstandings no longer disturb you. You understand that clarity comes from alignment, not approval. This stage of maturity is deeply freeing. You stop reacting, you stop performing, you stop carrying the burden of being understood. And in that release, peace enters. There is also a spiritual truth hidden here. When you stop seeking validation from people, you naturally turn inward, toward conscience, toward awareness, toward something higher than ego. You realize that life is not asking you to be impressive, it is asking you to be sincere. Your journey is sacred. It does not need explanation, it needs integrity. And one day, you will look back and notice that the very things you once wanted to explain are the things that shaped your strength. The silence you maintained became your foundation. The restraint you practiced became your power. The dignity you preserved became your peace. Remember this always, not everyone deserves access to your story, but everyone will feel the impact of your growth. Live consciously, heal quietly, grow deeply, because true strength is not in how much you say, it is in how steadily you become. And when your life speaks for you, words become unnecessary. Remember this, dear friends, God never asks you to expose your wounds to the world. He asks you to trust Him with your healing. Not every heart can protect your weakness, but every sincere prayer strengthens your soul. When you stop seeking validation from people, you make space for divine guidance to enter your life. Walk quietly, grow humbly, trust deeply, because when you place your faith above fear, your silence becomes strength, your patience becomes power, and your journey becomes purposeful. And one day, without explaining a single word, your life will become the message, a living proof that inner discipline, faith, and awareness always lead to lasting peace and true success. So live consciously, protect your heart wisely, and move forward with faith. Because when God is your support, you don't need the world's approval.